Welcome back to Prof E Plays. I'm Prof E, and we're picking up with the story of Mese Kinson here. This is episode number 16. I have a hard time believing we're that far in. But this is episode number 16 of the actual story, and then we also had kind of the three pre-episodes leading up to this. We are now in Act 2, Scene 6. No, not Scene 6, that was the last one. Scene 7. Need to read my notes properly. All right. So just to one thing, if you have not watched the rest of the story, you're kind of coming in what I hope is near the end at this point. So you can go back, use the playlist. The card probably vanished a few seconds ago. So you can follow the card to see the whole playlist, so you can get the story up to this point. Okay, so what is happening at this point is that Mese and Mara are on Piathos, the capital planet of the system, uh, and a lot happened in the last session. So they've followed a rogue AI here. We have learned that this rogue AI, through some kind of almost a pseudo-religious kind of motivation, is killing people, seemingly at random, it seemed. But now we have learned that these are people that it has considered to be evil or corrupt in some fashion, and that has included some of the political leadership here. Right. So, so we're trying to figure out how we can deal with this. So we're trying to convince the political system that they need to deal with it, whereas they're really just trying to turn a blind eye to it and act like nothing is happening, which made some degree of sense when it was just kind of homeless population being targeted. But now that we have had one of the leaders of this planet, the former leader, also dying under very mysterious, probably AI related circumstances, uh, you would think they'd wake up to this. Unfortunately, they've also been very distracted by other things going on, specifically one of our allies, a man by the name of George Warders, who formerly was part of the Imperial Navy, uh, and then left and turned terrorist. He decided that the obvious way to convince the government of this threat is for he himself to try to blow up the government, right? So that, um, yeah, that didn't necessarily go very well. Um, so at the moment, so we have a group of people, this group which has been identified as a splinter group. Let me go down here. So the people who are involved with that, Sarah Lazal is kind of a local celebrity. I like to use the analogy of she's the kind of person who people who frequent karaoke bars would recognize her, and she may not necessarily be that good at it. Uh, but she's a recognizable person for at least some people. Mara is Misa's friend of sorts, though they certainly didn't start that way. She's a drifter, but happened to be drifting the same direction as Mise. They ended up here. George Waters, that is the former Navy fugitive, right, who has turned terrorist and is now blowing stuff up here. And Shirakali is I guess, as far as we know, the last member of this group. It's a total group of five, including Mise, where she is the one that has the technical expertise that could potentially do something related to this. But notice she also is not super skilled. You can see she's at a +0, indicating she has some baseline knowledge of technology. She is probably the one that is most likely to come up with a plan for us. So that is the hope of what we're going to do here today. In any case, so we ended with explosion. Mise and Mara going and managing to run into George, figuring out that this was what he decided to do to deal with the problem. They are heading down to the docks. They kind of radioed ahead so that Shira should be meeting them there. We're not entirely sure where Sarah is. She kind of went off, and we haven't seen her recently. Right. So we're going to be meeting at the docks. We know that our safe house, which was kind of on an island, is certainly not safe. In fact, the authorities found us there. We gave a rather nonsensical story that, oh, we're just tourists and we were enjoying some time away on this island in the middle of uh, in the middle of the river where nothing is. But they bought it somehow. Right? I mean, this is really through Mara being the most skilled of us, right, using some of her drifter abilities and knowing how to throw the police off, I guess. In any case, um, so we know that that is no longer safe. We need to find a new safe house. We need to make a plan for how are we going to deal with this AI as uh, things are getting a little bit chaotic at this point. All right, so we are using the Covetous Poet. Solo GM guidebook and adventure creator. I think I may have the order wrong there. Doesn't particularly matter. So what they have you do is at the beginning of each scene, you roll for scene ideas, right, using this chart, right? So we'll start with the challenge scene because you use challenge scenes during Act 2. And we've got 9 is the type of challenge we're going to be dealing with. It is avoid danger or deal with threats. We've done this before, right? So yeah, I'm not sure whether the microphone is going to pick up on kind of this banging noise. That's our neighbors are getting a new siding put on. So there's a noise getting into our house. Okay, so avoid danger or deal with threats. Yeah, I think that's going to be unavoidable. Then we also have another number of elements, which are thematic based on genre, right? So first thing I'm going to roll is the plot device because it looks like that's where I am in the book right here. 185 is our plot device. So flip, flip, flip. Again, no obligation to use any of these because one, anytime you're solo gaming, you have no obligation at all. So this is the death card, prophetic visions of future calamity and death, right? Trouble a character. I feel like I'm not going to use that one, so I'll just write it down, death card. All right. Then we have sci-fi things, another D1000 table. So we'll roll on that. So if we need a thing, this is a thing that could potentially serve as inspiration. 134. 134 is a colony ship. All right, got that jotted down. Then we've got actions, another D1000. 786. So looking 786. This is research. I think that's definitely going to be involved with what we're doing here. And then I think the last thing we need would be opposition. One, two, three. Yep. No, no, opposition and location. We're missing both of those things, right? So location, another D1000, and this is 525. 525 location is the moon. Well, I guess we're looking for a safe spot. Let's just leave the planet. I'm not planning to actually do that. Then opposition right here is a D100 table, so we do not need all 3 of these D10s. We'll just roll 2, and we've got 05. So opposition here would be an alien slash space commando or a rival group. So alien or space commando or a rival group. This is all just was to serve as inspiration as we need it. I doubt that I'm actually going to use much of this right now. Because I think we're at the point now, if you haven't watched it, which many people haven't, uh, one of the videos that I posted a while back was thinking about uh, the RPG designer who goes by many names, but Runehammer, it would be his channel, is the designer of the Index Card RPG, ICRPG. Um, really like good stuff and really fun to listen to as far as that goes. He has wonderful ideas. And he talked about campaign structure. And I put together a video a while back about, I know it's like maybe 2 weeks ago, that kind of thing. Um, so I put together this video looking at his campaign structure and thinking about how to use it for solo gaming. And one of the points that he gets to is as you're heading toward the end, you're heading toward a finale in your campaign, kind of the last step that you need before you get there, right, is you got to come up with the plan. What does the checkmate look like? Right. But prior to that, you need a setback. I think that we've actually seen a significant setback here, specifically brought on by ourselves, in that George Waters is now really attracting the attention of the authorities. So it would not be surprising for them to be involved in some way. Right, so this is what I'm thinking we're going to be doing. So we're taking the group and we're just going to look for right, some kind of safe house or something like that. Um, in terms of locations and location moon. Okay, okay, this is going to work. Right, so what we found is that there's we were looking for like abandoned warehouses, something like that, not really turning anything up. What we could find was an abandoned lab. This is actually going to, I think, be very useful. This is an abandoned lab, so where Moon comes in is it makes me think of science, right? And so we managed to find right what was clearly used as some kind of scientific research facility. Oh, research was our action. Right? So and we move in there with Shira, who we had already met at the docks. Right, so we move into this space. It's clearly not used, right? So it's kind of dusty, broken glass places, that kind of thing. It's very clearly been used by some of the maybe some of the homeless population, which does exist here, right? And so they may have used it as shelter occasionally. So we are here right now. So I have an idea of what may possibly happen, right? So we all turn to Shira. They say, "Look, we have tried things. Right? Mese and Mara say, we tried to go and appeal to the current leadership. We couldn't even like get past the front door effectively. They didn't want to talk to us at all. They're not interested in what outsiders are going to say, even if we know something about what's happening here." Right? And George says, well, I tried to blow it up. That apparently didn't work, as far as we can tell, anyway. So this is where we are. Right? What should we do? You're the tech person. What's your idea? Right? And so Shira says, well, this is fundamentally a technological problem. What is Shira's personality like? Did I actually give her a personality? I don't know that I did. No, I don't have any notes about it. Right. Right. So she shares, well, this is a technological problem, so naturally it should have a technological solution. We know that this is motivated by some sense of morality, righteousness, religiosity, something like that. So the question is, right, is there some way that we can rewrite its ethical code so that it stops killing people? So I'm thinking what we need to do, right, is design some kind of patch. And so we'll have, I'll just call it the pacifist patch. So I'm going to design a pacifist patch that we then can patch into the AI system. And as long as it gets integrated with the system correctly, right, then we should see an end to the worst behaviors that we're seeing. Right? And this sounds on the face of it like it's somewhat reasonable. So, so I think that that's a reasonable idea. Right? And so like when we think some questions about it, so obviously, right, the AI is in some kind of distributed system at this point, most likely. So it's probably not in a single location, right, which means then it should at least hypothetically be possible for us, at least potentially, to have some kind of impact on its programming from anywhere, perhaps. This is all just kind of guesswork. We don't know the details of the system. That's not something we've really figured out at this point. But it does make some degree of sense that this is something that might possibly work, right? So Shira is very confident that given enough time, right, she will be able to come up with this patch. We don't know what's going to happen in the meantime, but she thinks that she can do it probably in just a few hours. It's fairly simple programming. Uh, it's really just fairly standard ethical subroutines that she just needs to make some modifications to. So she feels pretty confident that she can do this. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and give a roll for her. Remember, she's at a +0. I'm going to go ahead and give her a +2 on this one because I think this is a relatively easy task, right, compared to normal. So she gets a +2. We'll roll on this. 8, add another 2 to it, 10. So yes, so she is perfectly capable of doing this. I'm going to say it doesn't take her particularly long, say an hour, because she's kind of modifying code that already exists. And then the question is just how do we integrate it into the AI system? So simply the existence of the code is not enough, right? We need to somehow crack into the AI program itself to put these new lines of code in. That is where the trick is going to be, right? And I think that is where we do actually have a specific location we're going to have to get to. So let's just, for the sake of drama, say that there is a data center that we're going to have to get to. This data center has, fairly fast connections, that kind of thing, has strong connections throughout the world network. I know that there's a name for these networks. I forget what they call them um, in the Cepheus system, right? But it has some connection, right, with the this network. So since we know the AI is integrated, right, with this network, we should be able to get some access to it here. Now, the problem is that as soon as the AI recognizes that we're going to be trying to do this kind of thing, right, then, oh, that's a question. Have we caught the attention of the AI that doesn't know we're here? That seems extremely likely, unless, like, we ditched our hand computers or something like that. Right? So I'm going to say it's extremely likely. So this is at a 95. 87, yeah. So the AI knows actually where we are at this point. Now, I feel like it's also this is an old abandoned lab. It might not actually be totally connected. So I'm going to say 50-50. Are these computer systems connected right to the network so the AI knows what we are doing? 67. No. Okay. Right. So that means while the AI knows our location and can at any point, right, send people to get us if it wishes, right, it doesn't know what we're doing here because this is an old enough lab that things, the connection right between any kind of computers we have here and the overall network is simply not strong enough, or perhaps doesn't exist at all. It's just too out of date. That'd be another reason we cannot do this from here. We need to go somewhere where there's a stronger connection, where we know that things are up to date, and that is what the data center would do. Now, like, is this data center something that is in effect open to the public? Would be one question. I don't know. So let's roll 50-50, 40. So yes. So this is something that is actually open to the public. So getting in is not going to be the problem. The problem is that these things are naturally going to be fairly well guarded, I suspect. Right. So that being the case, right, this being a well guarded facility, the AI is going to know that we are there, and it's probably going to send people after us. Perhaps even we're on the way there. Even if we do things like, oh, let's leave the hand computer at home, that kind of thing, so it can't track us via GPS. We still have the problem that when we come in view of cameras, that the AI will be aware of where we are. Okay. And us going to a data center, it's going to have some sense because it knows that we are trying to stop it in some fashion or disrupt it in some fashion. And so it's going to be on guard. So the question is it possible for us to distract, right, this AI system, right, to then open up the possibility of Shira getting in, getting this patch uploaded so that then we can succeed. So I think that's it. We need to create some kind of distraction. Well, it turns out we do have somebody here who's very good at creating distractions, George. So we need to create a distraction, right? That the AI would end up focusing more of its computing power on. Now, I mean, you're naturally if we're talking about sentient computers that have connections all over the place that can, in some sense, be aware of more than one thing at a time. But at the same time, we know that processing power is limited, right? So if it's possible, right, we would want to try to kind of overwhelm it in some way, right? So what that naturally means is that we want to have it watching multiple locations at the same time, right? So that would be a sensible thing for us to do, right? So we want to have it, so we want it to have to watch multiple locations. And now we want to try to figure out. Um, so the question is, what can we do that's it's going to have to devote lots of processing power to this? Because there are obvious places that we might try to go again. After all, we've tried to make contact with the political authorities multiple times. That hasn't really been effective. We have now tried to commit serious acts of terrorism against government property. That was not particularly effective. Um, so these are the types of things that the AI would be expecting in some sense. So the question then is what type of distraction we would want to create. So I'm thinking because we have um, so I'm just plotting out in my mind here. So where Shira's going to be? Shira's going to go to the data center where she's going to upload the patch. We also have at least three, probably four other people. At this point, we also know where George is because George is here with us. He's very much a fugitive, and that's he was a fugitive from the beginning, right? So George, fugitive still, right? Uh, like he would be really good for like baiting law enforcement or something like that. So if we can come up with someplace else that he might try to create problems, right? Then that would be a good idea. So I'm wondering. So I'm going to say that we kind of pull up a map of the city, or we talk to those who are more aware of the city. So people like Shira or George, right? Say, okay, you know where the data center is. Now, where is someplace that's pretty far away from there that we can send George to, but then could potentially right attract right more law enforcement attention is the idea. So we want to get the law enforcement away from the data center so that it thinks that we're doing something over here. Right. Similarly, we want to have Mies and Mara probably separately doing their own things in other parts of the city. So we're trying to think of like if we divide the city up into pieces. Right. So we now have so we have George, Mies, Mara, and Shira. Maybe not Sarah, right? So we want to divide the city up basically into four sections, right? The section that has the data center in it is where we want people to kind of be emptied out of, or at least we want to have the AI's attention directed away from that. So what else is essential for the AI to operate? Well, I'm thinking like one, there's the data center itself is going to be important, but there are also naturally going to be things like you know, I'm thinking like the equivalent of like mobile phone towers and the like, right? So there are ways that things are being communicated wirelessly, right? So might there be multiple of those locations around that we may possibly want to attack? Right, then that is something that would create a distraction. Right? I can see that working. So that's the question. So I'm going to put that to so I think it's very likely, so I'm going to give it a 75% chance that there are kind of these multiple, effectively, like super Wi-Fi hotspots kind of dealing. All right, so 75 or less, that's a yes. 64, that's a yes. Right, so we have these hotspots around the city. So the three of us are going to each go to a different spot. We're going to go to various hotspots, right, to create some kind of disruption in what's happening. Disrupt what's happening there. That in itself doesn't have to be particularly effective as long as it's something that the AI feels like it has to respond to, is really the trick. So this is really just a form of deception to try to get the AI to respond. George, being the least stable of us and the most likely to do something destructive, we want to send him to the most important of these hotspots. I'm just taking notes. So. All right. As always, when I go silent, just speed up to two times or whatever. I'll come back in. Or just leave it at two times all the time. I don't talk that fast, right? In any case. And so that is our plan right now. So we're going to send Shira to the data center to upload this patch. At the same time, we're going to have George, Mies, and Mara at various locations around the city, locating where these hotspots might be, so that we can try to distract the AI's attention, so it is trying to protect these particular areas. So that is our hope, is that maybe by having kind of these four different tasks we're trying to do, that's going to slow down its processing. It doesn't necessarily recognize that we're going to be uploading this patch to it. So that's the idea. Now, one concern about this is, well, what happens, right, if the AI says, "Forget the hotspots. This data center, there's something going on." So I think one thing that we'll need to do is make sure. I don't think the AI can see in this particular building, so we need to make sure that Shira is, you know, disguised in some fashion. We need to find some way to kind of to stealth her where she needs to be. Right. So I'm going to double check. Do we have? I guess recon would be some ability there. Right. This feels like it's not a particularly difficult task, so I'm going to see. So Mies, given his knowledge of recon, is something he can reason through and come up with a reasonable way that we can um, come up with a plan for that. So I'm going to give him a +2 on this because I think it's a fairly easy task. It's a good thing we have that +2 on that. 'Cause that is 6. Like, +2 is an 8. 8 is good enough. Right. So yes, so me says, oh well, based on my experience with recon for scouts, for some reason, we would sometimes have to disguise ourselves from local fauna, that kind of thing, right? So some idea of how we can get you to kind of blend in, so you wouldn't be noticed necessarily. Uh, so and it's going to be a fairly basic one, disguise. I mean, cutting hair, these kinds of things. But okay, so Shira's going to have to say goodbye to whatever length hair she had, and now it is significantly shorter. Right, going to have to be wearing things like sunglasses or something like that, something that is going to obscure her face in some way, so it's more difficult for the AI to identify who she is. It's going to take more processing. That's really the key. I think George, Mies, and Mara are going to move out in the open. Um, so I think that's going to be helpful if we do that. So Shira is going to go in some kind of disguise, while the other three are going to be operating in the open. So I'm just making notes about this as well, because we're certainly not going to do this in this session, but I think that this is where we're headed. Okay. All right. So I think we have a plan. Right. So this plan is going to involve multiple locations, right, as we're trying to bring things to a finale. Um, so I think that we're pretty well set for thinking about what the finale is going to look like. Right. So I think this might be a good place to call it. So, as I often do, I'm going to vamp for a couple minutes before I actually call it. In any case, yeah, so I'm thinking next time, we'll say tune in for the finale of the story of Mies Kinson and the fight against the AI. Who knows, right, how this is going to actually turn out, whether this plan will actually work or not, but at the very least, I want to bring it to a conclusion of some kind. And that's going to be the plan next time. Thank you again for tuning in. This is Profi, signing off.